All right, Cam, it's live.
All
With
right.
Cam Inman, East Bay Times. I might well say Contra Costa Times. How are you?
Right. Remember when the whole internet started, we had a website called hotcoco.com, which was awesome. And like we were one of the first ones to get a newspaper online. And then honestly, probably that was what back in like late 90s, early 2000s, probably late 90s. And that's when I was covering like high schools in De La Salle and all that. And like probably one of the ways I was able to stay in the industry was just learning how to write fast and get stuff online quicker and kind of not worry about what makes the print edition. So yeah.
No, that's the thing. The young people, Google hot cocoa. That it wasn't called ContraCostaTimes.com. They registered hotcocoa.com.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
We're
that's history.
ahead of our times.
Right. And then maybe people know you, the 49ers, but it was De La Salle in the high schools. Tell people, they mentioned Cal Poly,
Yeah.
you grew up in Cupertino. Tell people how it all started for you.
Yeah. Okay. So my quick background is I grew up in Cupertino and I went to Monte Vista High School. So you know what? When I started covering preps in the East Bay in '95 for the Valley Times and Pleasanton, and then the Contra Costa Times, and people would find out I went to Monte Vista, and they'd be like, "Oh, you went to Monte Vista and Danville? No wonder that's how their coverage is skewed." I go, "No, no, no. You got the story wrong. It's Monte Vista and Cupertino." So I grew up in Cupertino. I went to Cal Poly, got my journalism degree there. Then I went down to Santa Maria, and that's where I had my first job. And I lived in Pismo at the time. And then I moved back to the Bay Area in '95. I got a job at the Valley Times in Pleasanton. It was covering youth sports, I think 2, 3 days a week, covering high school sports. And then nobody was covering pro soccer because the MLS was just starting. So I kind of put my hand up and said, "Hey, I want to become a beat writer at something." And so I like kind of figured out how to cover pro sports, and that was a lot of fun. And then so after doing high schools for mostly 5 years, 5, 6 years, then I transitioned into covering the Niners in 2000. And then I think I did the Niner beat for 5 years. And then all the newspapers would consolidate, and so it's like you never knew what you were going to be doing. Then I covered, oh gosh, I got to be an NFL columnist for a few years. Then I got to become a general columnist and do whatever I wanted 3 days a week, which was, boy, that's really not much like content that you had to do. That was easy living. And then, but I actually, when I was doing that, I was also our online guy. So if there was news breaking, I would do an online analysis called Candid Cam, and which basically that's all we do now is quick online analysis. And then in 2011, when Harbaugh came, they put me back on the Niner beat, and it's been a wild ride since then. Still no Super Bowls for them, but there's been a lot of ups, a lot of downs, a lot of quarterbacks, a lot of coaches. But it's great, and I do miss covering high school sports, especially high school football, just because. And you know what, Brian? Every year I go down to Cal Poly and I teach at a high school journalism workshop, and one of my classes that I teach is how to cover high school football game, because it really is a great entry point for people getting into the journalism business, because it kind of teaches you what needs to go into a story, what you have to kind of, how you learn to meet people, how to talk, how it's kind of grassroots. And it's a great way to learn how to write fast on a Friday night. And so I do miss doing it, because there's also the element of just how innocent everybody is still, and you're really playing for your team and your classmates rather than a paycheck. And if you want to get De La Salle centric, I mean, there's no program that exemplified just the team bonding and just the synchronicity that's involved in football than De La Salle football.
Right. And your memories, what would it be like mid to late 90s there at De La Salle? Yeah, just share some of the.
I came after the streak ended, I believe, and then I covered, I think probably what 90. I think I covered a couple of games in the mid 90s up through 1999 season, through the 99 season. Basically, this is how I remember. I remember the last De La Salle star that I covered, I think, was Kevin Simon, who followed DJ Williams and Matt Gutierrez. Is that right?
Yep.
Do I have my
Yeah, you got your timeline. Yeah, I went to Atari Callan to DJ Williams to Kevin Simon. That's a good memory.
Kevin Simon. Yeah, Kevin Simon was well, DJ was just an amazing athlete. And I remember John Madden saying he was the only, well, one of two guys he ever thought could go from high schools to the pros. And Simon was great too, though. So, but
no, linebacker, and then his senior year he played running back.
Yeah,
maybe that's it. You mentioned teaching the people that don't know. Tell them about keeping stats in the rain on a Friday night.
you know what? I was just looking for my old clipboard because honest to God, so in the old days, I don't have a prop. Anyhow, you'd be on the sideline. You got a clipboard with where you would keep the stats of every pass, every run, every catch, and so you kept your own stats. And I mean, no disrespect to the people that would do it on the teams, but you couldn't rely on the teams because maybe they would inflate them or they wouldn't be as accurate as you wanted to be. But then you'd also have to keep notes on a notepad of what actually happened during the play. So you would chart play by play and you would do stats. It was a juggling act. So I was going to say, I was looking for my clipboard. I'm at my desk in my home office. And I know I have like one of those clipboards still. And on the back is, I think, the last high school game I covered, which I think was a De La Salle game, which I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. So I know I didn't rip it off, but yeah. And I will tell you what, I covered high school football so when I was in high school, which was in the 80s in Monte Vista and Cupertino. And I got my start working for the Cupertino Courier. I turned pro when I was 16. That's when I started getting my paychecks for writing about sports. And I was also the editor of the high school paper. But and so I covered football for what, 15 years, 20. Anyhow, a lot. And it rarely rained on Friday nights. The football gods always looked out for me. I think there was only one game where it really just dumped, where you had to like maybe put your clipboard in a bag and kind of scribble. But I think that was like a Los Lomas High game or something. It was in the mud. It was terrible. And I tell you what, this year covering the 49ers, it rained more this football season, I think, than it's rained in 30 years of me covering sports, because we'd be out at practice, and I didn't mind it. I actually kind of laugh and enjoy it because it's like we don't get that rain that often, and it was cold and rainy a few days of practice, a couple rain games. There was we're in Colorado Springs with the Niners, and it was like wind chill of 6 degrees, and it was just absolutely miserable. And then they moved the practices the next 2 days indoors. But I was kind of like laughing, like, we really got some good weather out here for covering and like people that play football, because you go around the country and the elements are horrible. So I never took it for granted. And so anytime it rained, I'd be out of practice smiling, and the coaches, they get it. Players get it. They love being out there. It's better than being in a cubicle in an office.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think of the segue. No, that's actually the business of football. Mention that with the 49ers. You're spending time at the Greenbrier, Colorado. Tell people about these road trips. They go on for weeks.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. So I've been covering the 49ers for 23 seasons in the NFL, because there was some Raiders coverage in there too. And I think the best perk of the job, aside from meeting a lot of different people, like I think that's the number one thing, is just you get out and you meet so many different individuals, different backgrounds, and stars to no names, right? It's great. But the best perk outside of that is traveling the country. And when I was a kid in high school, I wanted to be a professional baseball writer. And I thought that would be the coolest thing, because you're going to a new city every few days, right? And then I quickly learned it's called the divorce beat, because you don't see your family or your wife 3-4 months out of the year. So when I got put on the Niner beat in 2000, we were just, my wife was pregnant with our first child, and I was really hesitant whether this would be a good job to do, because there would be traveling involved. And I was like, no, this is great. You're not gone that often. You're only gone like 10 weekends a year. And it is perfect. And so I've been to every NFL city. I've one of the last ones that I had to check off before the Vegas Raiders came into play. One of the last ones I had to check off was Buffalo. And my mom was from Buffalo. And so the Niners played there, I think, in 2016. And one of the beauties of when you go on the road is, in the old days, when the papers used to have money, you would go in on a Friday and the game would be Sunday, because you would travel wherever the team was, you would be, in case there was news. And there was news sometimes on Fridays or Saturdays where you needed to be with the team. But nowadays you usually go in on a Saturday. But so when you go in, you got to enjoy the city. And when I was in Buffalo, like for example, I drove over to Niagara Falls and I went running on the Canadian side of Niagara Falls. I like to go and find one of my weird fetishes is finding barbershops on the road, and usually just kind of like it's a good way to get away from everything for an hour or two and go into a small town and or a small town barbershop and just be able to chop up and talk sports with guys and don't necessarily tell them like I'm from California or what I do. Sometimes it'll come up, but it's just like you're part of the community, right? And you kind of get a good temperature of what's going on in the town. And then I am a craft beer, I don't want to say snob nor aficionado. I just enjoy a good craft IPA every once in a while. So for the last 10 years, since that's kind of become trendy, you find out what's the best beer in the country, and always got to try local rather than the California kind once you get out of the States. So a lot of different stuff, and then you just meet friends along the way, and that's been the best perk of the job, is just traveling around.
No, and you make the best of it. You're undercover there. You're running. I'm looking actually bring a full circle. Not your whole history, but those are all your press passes. You stood to before we started.
Well,
show me the first one. What was the first game you got?
So this actually is just the first day of COVID, right? When we all went lockdown. I'm like, well, we're probably going to have to be doing have some cool backgrounds and whatever. I don't think this is that cool, but I'm like, I sat down, I have like shoe boxes full of credentials. So this is just some of it. This is probably 1/30th of all the credentials, because I keep them and I don't know why I do. That's like kind of a pack rat. This one right here it's from the Central Coast section for Cam Inman. And that was in 88 and 89 when I was in high school. So yeah, I don't really have that great of a cool setup, but I mean, that's kind of like, this is my desk and stuff. So this is, there's a little bit behind the scenes of what Cam does when he's home.
No, you're giving me inspiration. I'm cheap. I should buy some stuff and put it behind me. All I did was buy 2 gnomes. I can do better than that.
I honestly like the gnomes because it's some people but got too much, like this is kind of distracting, obviously, but you can't really make it out. So you can't try to figure out what's going on. And then we won this Pebble Beach painting or something last year. And I love it. That's my favorite spot on earth, right? So, but some people really get, these backgrounds, they put a lot of time in. I appreciate it. But for the most part, you're here to talk to whoever's on.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I put 2 minutes into my background, so I might have to up my.
I like it though. It's good.
Okay. All right. And then what about currently the 49ers? They just had their season. The guy I'm fascinated by is Purdy. I mean, Mr. Irrelevant, where 32 teams passed on him 7 times until the 49ers got him with the last pick. I mean, you would have known him a little bit. Did you even know he was on the team until he moved up the depth chart?
Yeah, I mean, it's right now. It's like, gosh, I hope he's not like a Moonlight Graham where he just came in for like a quick cameo and then got called away because of the arm's gone. But I'm going to be honest with you, and I think he was obviously outstanding when the Niners needed him to come in and help their playoff push, and he won 8 games before they lost in the NFC Championship game when he blew out his elbow. But Brock was during the season, he was a wonderful, and I've seen it. Nick Mullins kind of did the same thing where they take their job really seriously, and they know that at some point they may get their shot. And if they get their shot, this is a great lesson for everybody. Just be prepared. When everything goes down, you better be ready. And he was ready, remarkably, for the hardest job in the world. But you go in the locker room, he'd be sitting at his locker, just studying plays, studying the playbook, going over the practice scheme. Fred Warner did the same thing his first couple of years in the 49ers. And now he's like your quarterback savant on defense. But if you want to go back to when the Niners drafted Brock Purdy, he was the last pick of the draft, number 262 out of Iowa State. And our neighbors went to Iowa State, so they knew who he was. I had no idea who he was. And like that late of a pick, you're just like, whatever, it's a developmental prospect. Maybe he'll make the practice squad. And then 2 weeks after the draft, they bring him in for a rookie mini camp, and they bring him into the media room one at a time. We got to talk to guys. I remember once we were done with Brock Purdy, we had like 10 minutes interviewing him, and he leaves the room, and I said to somebody, I go, I like this guy. I'm rooting for Brock Purdy. Like obviously you don't root for people, and you're never supposed to say something like that. But it was so outlandish that this 260-second pick might become something in the NFL. But the way he carried himself and the composure and the subtle confidence of like if he got his chance, he was going to make the most of it. And by golly, he goes through training camp, and all these people that say they saw in training camp they look great, they're BSing you unless they're the coaches. The coaches know what they're looking for, and maybe one or two media members may, but I certainly didn't, because he would throw 5 passes a practice. When you're the third string guy, you're not getting those reps with the first, second string. And so he would barely throw. So you didn't really know what he could do. And then in the exhibition season, he started getting more action, but he wasn't putting up amazing numbers where you'd say, oh, this guy's a lock. Like you figured practice squad guy. But the thing was, Nate Sudfeld didn't do enough to hold on to the job. And so it's like, forget Sudfeld. We sunk $2 million in it. It's like, to me, I was basing it off of money. And I'm like, it's follow the money, right? Well, the Niners blew out $2 million on Nate Sudfeld, and they didn't keep him. So they kept Brock Purdy instead. It was a great pick for them to keep. And then they kept Garoppolo. And that was a whole nother saga that I've never seen. And then Trey Lance was supposed to be the guy. So now, fast forward, Brock Purdy's going to go elbow surgery. Nobody knows what's going to happen with him. Obviously, the most optimistic is he comes back in 6 months. That's kind of rushing it. I'm not expecting, like, if they didn't have any other court, but you have Trey Lance, the guy who was the QB1 last year at this time, right? So as long as Trey Lance can stand on his repaired ankle, that's going to be his job, I would imagine, going into the season. And if he stumbles, then you look at Brock. But I think right now it's like the hot hand. Well, Trey's better be the hot hand. Otherwise, this is his last shot.
Correct. And then you mentioned following the money. Does Lance have an advantage because so much money was spent on him that the 40, or maybe not?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Not anymore. Because I think you're far enough in where they could say, sure, we blew a bunch of first round picks on Trey Lance, but we got Brock Purdy for nothing with this last pick of the draft. So it's like, it's the balancing out. It's the NFL trying to find a quarterback. It's so darn hard. And like these GM, you won't find general managers that find 2. It's really hard to find one. And so the fact that they probably found one in Brock Purdy, it's like, but you may also have some in Trey Lance. Nobody knows anything about Trey Lance. If everybody thinks that they're an expert, it's baloney. Nobody knows. He hasn't played enough. He's played 3 games. And he's gotten hurt like 2-3 times. So he needs to stay healthy, but it's not like he's trying to get hurt. It happens. It's not the coach's fault. But he's really well liked. I like him. I think he's got every opportunity in the world in front of him right now. So, but it's the Niners. So this is the one thing I've learned about covering this team for 23 years or whatever. There's 2 things about covering this team. You cover the quarterback, and then you cover everybody else. It is insane how much, just in the Bay Area here, because we all grew up in the Bay, that it's so quarterback centric, especially in the NFL. It is a quarterback centric league. But in the Bay Area, when Joe and Steve were delivering Super Bowls and playoff runs, the Niner fans expect that. And when it's gone 28 years, I think, without a Super Bowl, it's like, well, we've gone through a lot of different quarterbacks here. Who's going to be the guy? And so when you see Brock Purdy kind of come on the scene and they hadn't lost with him, you're like, could he think, oh, it's Joe Montana magic? It's like, I don't know about that, but it just shows you how to take advantage of an opportunity and appreciate what you can do.
Right. And it shows how the draft is an inexact science, where the 49ers sold the house. They thought they had to move up to get Trey Lance, and they got him. And then the next year, they just hang out to the last pick and get Brock Purdy. I mean, that's crazy, isn't it?
Their best player last season, all due respect to Nick Bosa, I thought Bosa is the best player in the NFL, but the catalyst of last season was Christian McCaffrey. The guy who they should have drafted number 2, or when they went down to number 3 overall in 2017, they should have taken him. Instead, they took Solomon Thomas, his Stanford teammate. And I get it. Like, running backs are replaceable in the NFL, especially with Shanahan's offense. But what Christian McCaffrey's done, being a receiving and a rushing threat, and just a consummate pro and a hard worker, and he blends in with the superstars of the team, that's your guy. That's who they should draft in 2017. So that's your inexact science of the draft. And like George Kittle was a 5th-round pick. They had like Talanoa Hufanga was what, 6th round, and he made All Pro last year in the 2nd year. So, and Fred Warner was a 3rd rounder. So it's like the 1st and 2nd rounders really is a crapshoot. And I will say, I think they've drafted some really quality guys. Reuben Foster was the exception because he kept running into trouble with his girlfriend, and that was not good. So they cut ties with him, in 2018, like 2 years into it or so. But other than that, they've had pretty outstanding guys, which in an NFL locker room, that's pretty hard to do. But the like 6 years before, they had so many arrests, and it was really a stain on the league of how many guys from the Niners were getting arrested for stuff, and it wasn't great. And I think the message came across clear. They needed to find not choir boys, but people that took their job seriously and understood the profession and what comes with it.
Another guy they got later, Debo.
Yeah, Debo's an interesting guy because he really is a big superstar, right? And he didn't have a great year this year coming off his contract extension. In terms of my job of learning how to deal with different personalities, a lot of times you don't know what you're going to get with Debo, which is fine. It's not a complaint of mine, but it can be moody, or it could be he could ignore you, or he could be chatting you up. So there's, of all the different characters that I've covered, Deebo's I don't want to say he's an introvert, but he kind of is. And then sometimes he can turn on his charm and he answers questions, but he's never going to really. I love the players that will teach you something, because the more they teach and give us insight, the more we as reporters can relay it to the audience. We're kind of like the concierge for information for you. And I want the players that kind of can explain plays. It doesn't have to be in football jargon, because we have to simplify it for the readers usually too. And a lot of times the offensive linemen or linebackers are great at that kind of stuff. Kittle, I think, is really good at it because he has a passion for the game. He also knows how to ham it up for the cameras and appreciate the entertainment aspect, because sports is entertainment, and that shouldn't get lost on it. For some of the guys, just take it way too, like some of the media people take it way too seriously, like they're cooking financial books and stuff. And it's like, dude, this is sports, all right? But you learn so much about finances. You learn so much about medicine, sports medicine, and injuries. But you also learn about just people's backgrounds and just it's real life. Like one of the Niners linemen became a dad like about 2 months ago, and he barely made the birth for his baby, for his firstborn, before he had to get to the game. And I was just like, just tell me about what that day was like. And I just kind of like, it's the humanistic element, I think, that we all appreciate from some of these guys. And you always kind of like, but off the field, I tell people, I don't know what most of these guys do. And I don't need to know. This is their private time. It's their private life. Jimmy Garoppolo was probably the most reclusive superstar I've ever been around in 25 years. Nobody knows what he does away from and that's fine. He has 3 brothers that he hangs out with. He's from Chicago. He's probably going to another team within the next week or 2. And I got along great with Jimmy, but and I didn't pry. It's like whatever he does in his personal life is his own time. Like I did talk to him last year when he was kind of thrown on the side, and I said, "So what did you do all off season? Like you were rehabbing in LA?" And he's like, "Yeah." I go, "Did you get away at all?" And he became a godfather to his brother's firstborn son, so that was kind of neat. And then said he went to he was a groomsman in weddings, and I think it was in Nashville and like Houston or something. And I'm kind of like, just like, that's amazing that stuff doesn't get out, like pictures of him in a wedding. And it's people respect his privacy. So what I'm trying to say is there's a line between reporting and being a friend. And so I've always tried to stay on the reporting side.
Excellent. And then I'm trying to think, you mentioned that was an interesting, before Trey Lance got hurt, he didn't even have a playbook. He just was out there. I think
but he had a playbook for 5 years. He didn't need a playbook. So that part of the story got overblown. But the fact that they made him come and report for training camp, but they wouldn't let him participate because there was too much financial guarantees. And so he threw on the side field to a former high school player who was an intern in their performance and performance staff. I mean, because all he's doing is kind of running some easy routes and catching footballs 20 yards downfield. But it was such a bizarre spectacle when you have 90 guys out on the two fields next to him, and then he's in the shadows, and he's like the superstar of the team still, who's won so many games for them, but he's in limbo and he's not bitching about it, and nobody's totally ignoring him. But it was so weird, and then it worked out better than they could have ever expected for everybody, because he got them back into the playoff contention, I guess, because Brock finished it off. But then, and he raised his own stock when everybody was worried about whether his shoulder would work again. He had so many injuries, and then he breaks his foot on just trying to get an extra yard to escape a sack. So, I mean, I like Jimmy a lot. I think he's deserving to go to a playoff contender, and he's going to have more success. But the Niners, I understand they got to cut ties, because that's run its course, him and Shanahan, and they have the two young quarterbacks now that have to get healthy and play.
Yeah, the days of having Montana, Young, and Steve Bono are long gone.
Yeah, but those guys still come around, don't they? The Niners have welcomed all the past heroes back a lot the last few years, which is good to see, because it kind of inspires the players, and everything in the Bay Area still revolves around that group, because nobody's won Super Bowl since then. Like once Super Bowls are won, and it's going to be like, hey, bring back we got to bring back Christian McCaffrey. He was so great for our Super Bowl. Like everybody's going to forget the Montanas and the Ronnie Lotts, because it's a new generation.
Right. No, we're middle-aged men. I mean, how lucky were we to grow up in the 80s to witness those 4 Super Bowls, and then the 5th in the 90s. And it is whatever, a 1994, that Super Bowl over San Diego. I mean, it's been, at least they've been there twice. I think of the Cowboys, who haven't even, I think, been to a championship game since 1995. I think that's correct.
Yeah, but it's still just they got to get over that hump. It's this area doesn't appreciate the playoff runs. It's oh, we got stopped. It's we got teased again. That stinks. So, but I mean, and I guess just circling back to the high school Bay Area scene, I love the fact that there's enough strong programs around here because I think football's in real peril. I mean, the tackle football, with all the concussion stuff that's come out in the last 10 years, and the participation levels and these other sports that athletes can do, it puts football in a bind. And I remember probably about 12 years ago, there was a player on the Niners who said, the tackle football is going to be gone in 15, 20 years. I said, you're crazy. He goes, just watch. He's like, there's going to be too many health studies out. And you see the way the NFL is promoting flag football now. And I mean, Patrick Walsh, the De La Salle product over on the peninsula of Sarah High, started next level flag football, and it's taken off like gangbusters. And flag football has taken over. Now, I was a flag football champion in elementary school at noon league recess. Loved flag football. I'm all for it. And then you saw the best commercial of the Super Bowl was the flag football. Was it Diana Flores or whatever that was running through the commercials trying to get the flag? The NFL is gravitating that way faster than I think we realize. And when participation levels in high school tackle football are down, it's cause for concern. But I think the sport is such a great sport that it will evolve somehow. But there's so many strong programs around the Bay too, and I dig it. And I think that's a tribute to the coaches, the people that kind of set the foundation. You know what was cool, Brian, was John Madden. I got to know him a little bit over the years, and then after he unfortunately passed away just over a year ago, they had the memorial service at the Coliseum. I think the day after the Super Bowl was cold, rainy like it is right now. And so not too many people came. And then there was a little private ceremony in the Oakland Arena next door. And I got to catch up with Bob Ladouceur. And I hadn't seen Ladd in years. And it was just, and Matt Sweeney was there. And it was here you have these two dynamic football coaches that are legends. And just seeing the two of them interact. And then I got to say hi to them. And it really brought me back to my roots of how things started with my Bay Area sports writing career, 25 years ago.
Yeah, no, full circle. And then
Yeah.
I'm looking here. I'm cheap, Cam. I'm on a clock here. It says we have 6 more minutes of free time. So
Oh, okay. So what do you want to finish with? I'll give you
yeah,
one.
I don't know. I'll let you finish, and we can do more in the future. I mean, I'll respect your pick my shots when you have time. This is a good time. Maybe yeah. Maybe I'll give you the final word. What have I forgot to talk about? Is there anything you'd like to add here? I mean, you've been an excellent guest.
Well, if we're talking about De La Salle sports, and it made me kind of reflect back to those football games. They taught me a lot of lessons also on how to cover teams and cover like a prestigious program. Um, that also trickled down to basketball too with Frank Galacco. I love covering his teams, baseball teams, covering the last Walsh brother, Nicholas Walsh, going through the baseball program too. Loved it all. And then even Carondelet too. There was, we had my daughter played. I had 2 daughters that played high school sports, and so they had friends that went to Carondelet, and appreciate all that too. So I just, and I have a son right now who's a freshman in high school. He's a cross country runner. Tried to get him in every sport possible. And the guys, he was like me. He's like a good mascot, but athletic talents are not our game. And so he's running like to his heart content, running track and cross country, and I love it. So I guess my pearl of wisdom is to stay active. It's important to be part of a team and support others and enjoy life.
Man, that's a great way to end. And we ended under the wire. Let me, yeah, no, this is fantastic. I'll stop the Zoom and I'll talk to you briefly afterwards. But people don't know how to know. I mean, we've known each other for years. I don't think we see each other today. I don't think we've seen each other in person 10 years, if not longer.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I'm glad we could get in touch like this again, Brian.
well, absolutely. Oh, hold on a second, Cam. I'll stop the
Yeah.
Zoom. Very cool. Thanks again.